everyone, and welcome back to our channel. So today we're gonna continue our conversation and talk about taking home your baby. So yesterday I talked about what you need before you take your baby home, and today we're just gonna talk about what to expect in the first few days when you take your baby home, and what most parents go through in the first few days when they take their baby home. I did mention in the previous video that that SID is a common scare of every mom, because it does happen to babies. So it is very important that your baby sleeps in her bed and has no blankets, no pillows, you know. But I don't really need to talk about this. This is something that most parents research before they take home their baby. And this was a huge issue for us actually, because up until during the 3 months while the baby was in the hospital, she was covered in blankets and she was snuggled up all the time. She was bundled up, so she wasn't moving much, and she was sleeping more and just gaining more weight. And so we went from the last day in the hospital when she was still bundled up. She was wearing her preterm outfit, but she was still bundled up, and then we took her home, and we were expecting her to sleep in a bed without any of these things that that she was used to. So it wasn't really a big surprise that she just didn't want to sleep. So we had the little box for her to sleep in, the baby box. As I mentioned in the previous video, it's about half the size of a baby bed, and she was so small that she could still turn 360 in the box, so she could actually sleep sideways, not just lengthwise. She was so tiny, so she still felt that space is too big for her. So this is something that most moms go through. Even if your baby wasn't a preterm baby and wasn't bundled up in the hospital, the baby just came from the womb, from your uterus, where she spent, where the baby spent her last few months being in a completely tight space, having no room at all, and then the baby is out and they feel gravity for the first time, and also this huge big space, and they just don't feel comfortable. So so it's very common for moms to bundle their babies and swaddle their babies up. You can buy all these blankets, swaddling blankets, and all that things to swaddle your baby, and it makes a huge difference. They just sleep so much better. This is something that when she was still in the hospital, I went to a class, so to speak, where we talked about the safety issues when you take home your baby, and what to make sure that you do just to keep your baby safe from suffocating. And we were actually told not to swaddle the baby and not to use any of those methods, just to have her in her clothing, and that's it, just to be on the safe side. And also they mentioned that preterm babies have a bit of a higher risk of SID, so I was extremely scared to put anything else on her, and so I didn't really want to swaddle her at all. But then I had the issue of her not wanting to sleep at all if she wasn't. Obviously she fell asleep on me or in my arms extremely easily, but as soon as I put her down in her bed, she woke up and she was screaming. So basically what we decided, or what solution we found, is kind of a sleeping bag that you can buy for your baby, and we put her in that instead of her clothing, and it just looks like a sleeping bag, and you can zip it up all the way to the neck, and she feels more restricted in it. She can move in it, but not as much. She just feels a bit of a restriction, and that helped so much that she could sleep a lot better. We did have to put a blanket on her as well, so she had to be in a sleeping bag, and then we put a blanket, really made sure that the blanket can't really move, and it was just covering up her bottom half. They did say at the hospital that that's an option if you really want a blanket, or you really need a blanket in the crib, then make sure it only comes up to the bottom half of the baby, and it's very snug and fit in under the mattress, so it can't really move. So we needed both of those things for her to actually be able to sleep. It was still really hard, and every mother is still gonna go through this. Most likely the biggest issue is for the babies really just to feel comfy and secure enough to be able to sleep on their own, so to speak, even though you're right next to them. Like, my baby box was right next to the bed, so she was very close to me, but still she needed that comfort feeling. So most moms probably gonna have the same issue, and the baby's gonna fall asleep on their breast or in their arms, but as soon as you put her in the bed, they're gonna be up and screaming. So this is a common issue that we moms face, and it just takes time for the baby to get used to this whole new world, and then it obviously gets easier. But that's part of the reason why most moms don't get much sleep in the beginning, at least the first few days. It's because the baby just doesn't want to sleep on their own, right? And because the baby wakes up to eat, breastfeed depending on the baby, but it can be from every hour and a half to every 3-4 hours, depending on the baby. My baby was waking up every hour and a half to every 2 hours to breastfeed, and then every time we had to change the diaper. She breastfed, and she also needed formula because I just didn't make enough milk, and then came the putting her back to sleep. And thank God, during the night this was very easy. I only had to put up a very dim light to change her diaper, and she was so sleepy that she fell asleep on the breast or the bottle, and then we could just put her in the bed without having much issue once we had that sleeping bag for her, and she felt snuggle enough. So during the night we had not much issue. You still obviously expected that your baby's gonna wake up quite often to breastfeed. You have to change the diaper and then put her back to sleep, and if you're lucky enough then you're gonna have no issues, like we did have no issues putting her back to sleep. If you're not lucky enough, then the baby's, and we did have a few nights like that when she just at 3 a.m. she just didn't want to go to sleep. Obviously most babies have a little bit of tummy troubles, and that's expected. I think most babies go through that, since they go from being in your stomach and getting all the food through their bloodstream to actually eating breast milk if they are lucky, and formula if they are less lucky. And it is, breast milk is, I think, quite easy to digest, but then comes formula, and we had a lot of issues once formula was introduced in her diet with her digestion. So lots of the times the baby just doesn't want to sleep because they are not comfortable, their tummy is hurting, they are gassy, and they are crying. So that's something that is also expected in the first few days to the first few weeks, as she's eating more and more. This was a big issue for us, and I think it was mainly the formula, because we had to introduce the formula to her, and her tummy was quite sensitive to start with. And you can buy at the pharmacy We bought homeopathic medicine for colic, and they did help, but mainly the biggest help was really just burping your baby as much as possible, and massaging the tummy as much as possible and moving her legs. But there were times when just nothing happened, and the baby just cried and cried, and you just had to kind of soothe her. And that's something that most parents can expect, I think. And I can't really say that she was a colicky baby, but she definitely had tummy issues, digestive issues, and I do think that most babies have at the first few weeks some kind of a tummy issue, so that's something that can be expected by their mothers. And as I said, lots of burping is the best way of working through that and helping that. Also, sometimes you thought that you burped her, like you tried, you were patting her back so much, like you thought that she can't burp anymore and that it can't be an issue, and then you turned her on her tummy, or I don't know, as you were moving her around, you pushed her tummy and then she burped. That was a huge burp. So lots of the times when the baby just keeps crying and keeps crying and keeps crying, she needs to burp. And even if you just burped her, and if you tried burping her for like 10 minutes and she's not burping and she's still crying, there's a big possibility that the baby just still needs to burp. And lots of the times when the baby cries and cries and cries and just doesn't want to go back to sleep, or just doesn't want to go to sleep, it is because they have to burp. And even though as I said, I keep repeating myself, but even though you spend like 10 minutes trying to burp your baby and nothing's happening, most likely the baby just needs to burp. And in the hospital, obviously we learned how to burp the baby, so that wasn't an issue. But what they actually taught us was obviously just putting her on your shoulder and burping her like this. And then the other method was just putting her on her tummy and laying her down and then patting her back. And there were times when these were just not effective enough, and you just couldn't get a burp out of her. So you have to work around the baby and try to find different positions, and sometimes you just have to push the tummy. So sometimes, I mean, it helps a lot that when she's on her tummy and you have the nursing pillow under her, and then you're burping, you're patting her back. I noticed that worked. That was the most effective way of actually burping her. Obviously, for us, actually, during the night, usually we didn't have too much issue, as I was saying. It was just at 10 p.m. and she had this schedule from the hospital, so when we brought her home, she was quite awake and up. Not 10 p.m. Oh, I wish it was 10 p.m. She was up from about 8 o'clock up until about 11 p.m. Later on 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. She was up the whole time, and she didn't want to go to sleep. But around 10 or 11 she got tired enough that she was crying and crying. She was overtired, but you couldn't get her to sleep before, and you couldn't get her to sleep after. So for us that was a hard period. So it was usually every day starting at like 10 or 11 p.m. and going for an hour or 2 hours when she was just overtired but didn't want to go to sleep. And for us that was the hard period actually, when there was just a lot of rocking her, and she wanted to cluster feed, so we had to feed her a lot during those few hours, burp her a lot during those few hours, and then just rocking her a lot. And then and this went on for a long time, so we spent about 2 to 3 hours each night just trying to get her to sleep. When you look at the baby and she's crying and you're like, why can't, like, you're trying to figure out why the baby is crying in the first few days when you go take her home And you know, it's diaper change, obviously, or checking if she's hungry, and then it could be her tummy, or she could be sleepy and just not be able to fall asleep. So those are usually obviously the burping was included in the tummy part. So those are usually the reasons why the baby is crying. And for us, this everyday evening crying was because she was just overtired, but she didn't want to go to sleep, and she got into this schedule from the hospital, so it was extremely hard to get her off of this schedule. So we kind of just had to go with it for a few months, and it was just a lot of patience needed at that point. I think I covered everything I wanted in this video, so we're going to end it here. Whoop. You want to say bye to the camera? Just say bye bye YouTube. Yeah, bye bye YouTube. Say bye bye and say that I'm going to see you in the next video. Yeah.